is it's not that people go all the way to paranoid or all the way to gullible. It's that they develop this preference for certain kinds of ideas to be true. And then when information comes in that confirms that, they go totally gullible.
Yeah.
Anything, any kind of article, they don't ask, is this fake news? They don't ask, like, is this study, who conducted the study? The filter goes wide open. They go full gullible. See, there's proof, and they're so sure about it. Meanwhile, anything that conflicts with their sacred belief, the thing that they want to believe, their little pet theory, the filter closes up. There's nothing you can present them that would make them say, actually, I need to reconsider. Nope, they're lying. See, that's the deep state. That's the whatever it is. The right and left, it's like they're both doing the same thing.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you are welcome. You know the drill. Please subscribe, rate, comment, share, reach out, tell your friends, send smoke signals, whatever. We love your feedback, and we want to hear from you. If you like our work and want to support us, the best way to do that is join PHETASY.com. You'll get access to behind-the-scenes content, outtakes, discounts on merch, and the ability to submit questions for some of our upcoming guests. Support your favorite scrappy little internet heroes at PHETASY.com. All right, I'm with Tim Urban, everyone. Welcome to Walk-Ins. Welcome.
Yay.
It's really exciting to have you here.
Totally. I'm very excited to talk to you.
I think you're one of my favorite thinkers on Twitter in particular, and I love your writing. I've been a fan for a long time, and like we were saying before we started recording, I've felt like you were my friend, even though I'd never met you until 5 seconds ago.
Yeah, Twitter has like a weird way of, it's like a certain very odd phenomenon where it's like there's a good handful of people I follow on Twitter who I'm like, if someone was like, oh, do you know them? I'm like, yeah, they're a friend of mine, even though we've never spoken.
Yeah, it's a good filter, I think, because people are so honest on it.
Yeah, and you're just kind of like hanging around. Like if you're just hanging around the same conversations on Twitter and like sometimes commenting on each other's things, and it's like it's just this like understanding. Like obviously, if and when we meet each other, we're obviously friends, but that just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, it's like a global water cooler.
It's kind of like a sneaky good way to meet new people. Actually, I've made like legit friends on Twitter, which I never would have thought, like it's I never joined it thinking that was something that was going to happen, but it kind of, there's some, there's certain people who I like their stuff and vice versa. And we probably would have just, without something like Twitter, just gone on liking each other's stuff and had no idea either one, it was reciprocated. Or that the other person had any idea who you were. And here it's like, oh, you can both be like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah. It's like this, it is reciprocated. And then like, before you know it, you're kind of just chatting, and it's like, yeah, kind of an interesting engine for that.
Yeah. It's, I always joke on this podcast that this podcast actually should have been called All of My Friends Are From Twitter, because so many of the people that I interview on this podcast have become good friends, and I've met them through Twitter. And I have now lifelong friends, people I expect to be in my life as long as I'm around, through that website, which was, like you said, it's, there's a lot of talk about the downside of Twitter, and there's a lot of things that are negative to a lot of the social media, but I think Twitter in particular has a lot of upsides. I don't really feel like they get enough credit. It's why I'm still there. I'm going down with that ship.
Yeah, like totally agree. It's for me at least, the positives. I think for society maybe like the negatives maybe outweigh the positives, but for me, it's like there's a social aspect. There's also just the fact that it's a place where I can test ideas in 1 second and get instant feedback. Mm-hmm. I can instantly poll 1,000 people on something. Like that's like, and like get my result in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And I think if it disappeared today, it's like it would, you can tell if something is a valuable service to you by, if it disappeared, would you be like crushed, or would you be like, I'll just go like use a different version of this or whatever. And Twitter is one that, like, if that disappeared, I would be one of these people who's just barely on social media now, because it's the only one I use. And I would just, right now, some thought pops into my head. Some like interesting concept. Like I have like a place to put it on the internet. And, it's like without writing a whole article, I can just be like, oh, I'm just gonna like send that to my readers and see what they think. And if it weren't for Twitter, that would just disappear. And I would be like, either it's going to be an article one day or it's not. But this isn't going to end up anywhere right now.
That's how it is with comedy too. I can kind of test ride premises on Twitter. If something gets a big response or something that I was not expecting to get a big response gets a big response, I suddenly think, oh, there's maybe something more there that I'm not aware of. Or although I will say, since I've become a parent, I'm spending a heck of a lot more time on Instagram than I ever did in my life. And I used to hate Instagram, but my husband and I was laughing hysterically at all these reels that were on there about parenthood. And then my husband started watching and we were both dying laughing. And I'm like, they're so relatable. It's
actually
relatable.
I don't know. I'm not sure like exactly how the info gets to the algorithms, but not only does social media know I have a baby, but it knows the exact age. Like when the baby
Oh,
was
wow.
2 weeks old, I was seeing like videos of how weird it is when you put a bottle anywhere near a baby's face and they like do this like weird jerky thing to try to find it. They like frantically like look for it. And I was like, that is so cute and amazing. And like me 2 weeks before would have found that super boring. And even me now, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't like, I'm over the 2-week-old babies. Like I don't care
Yeah.
about them anymore. Now it's all about the 3-month babies because you care about the kids that are exactly somehow
Yeah.
like it figured out exactly what was going on. And like, I don't care how. I'm like, so totally. And it's like, it's Instagram is the one that my wife uses and she will send me posts that she wants me to look at. And then later she'll go like do a full like curated show for me on the projector, like going through the ones she did, which I used to do with TikTok for her. And I was like the TikTok curator. And then people freaked me out about TikTok having like trying to consume your text or something. And it was like enough people had said something. I was like, okay, this seems like more than just like conspiracy theory, perhaps. I don't know. And I just deleted it. But I'm sad. I miss TikTok.
I haven't been on it. I won't put it on my phone. I've always been suspect of it. We went on one night with my nephews are really into it. Because obviously, and they showed me how it worked. And I was like, and my husband and I were saying, and now our brains are pudding, it's just like that function of just swiping up. And now Instagram has it, but for some reason, and the algorithms on TikTok are supposedly the best, even better than Instagrams are. But it is interesting how well these social medias know us better than we know
I would
ourselves.
describe like Instagram has successfully put me into like categorize me into like a group of, I don't know, a couple, million people or a few 10 millions of people who vaguely like share my vibe and my interests in my life. Well, TikTok feels like that group was smaller. I was like, it has me pinned down to like a group of 10,000 people that are like really specifically interested in this particular set of things you're showing me. It started to get very finely tuned. And it was impressive. And like, I know we're supposed to be like upset and scared about that, but I was also like, this is awesome. Like same with like targeted ads. I'm like, good, please get better at targeting. Like creep on me and target the internet to me so that everything I do on the internet is like amazing for me. Like what's the problem there? I mean, other than the fact that it's super addictive and it's like a huge waste of time.
Yeah, that was in your book talking. I was laughing because I have a whole stand-up routine that I've been trying to work out forever about those internet rabbit holes that you go down where you go on to like pay a bill and it's 9 a.m. and you're like, all right, I'm just going to log in and pay my credit card bill. And then it's like I joke like every rabbit hole leads to 9/11 was an inside job and the sun's going down and you're like, how did those towers fall down so straight? And you're like, what happened?
Especially if the task I need to do is for work for some reason, if I need to search for an account on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, I'm done. Like, and it's never conscious. It's like I will go on and with totally good intentions to go do this thing, and then 10 out of 10 times, totally unconsciously, 5 minutes later, I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I was just working. How did I? And I'm like, oh, I was searching for something. And it's like, just going to the search page on Instagram, before you type in your thing, it shows you all of this
Yeah.
trash clickbait below you that it's like just really hard to not click on one of those, and then you're done.
Yeah. The For You page is a mess. It's just always
Mess. And now,
like,
by the way, Twitter was the one that was like, it was at least, okay, all Twitter showed me was my followers and then things my followers liked and retweeted and whatever. So that was kind of like my followers, sorry, the people I followed curating for me, which was great. And to me, it was like actually kind of like what I planned on doing there. It wasn't like crack that someone had suddenly been, but now the For You tab, it defaults to the For You tab. And
I
again,
love
no
it.
one thinks about this. No one opens up Twitter and they're like, which tab am I on? And what's the
Uh,
plan now? What do I want to be using this next hour for? They just open Twitter by default, and then they're just on the For You tab without realizing it. And they're scrolling down, and suddenly I'm looking at, like, it reminds me of like I'm looking at fights. I suddenly I was on something. There was like some culture war account that I didn't sign up for, and now I'm like looking at their things, and then you go into the video and you start swiping, and before you know it, I'm in like a loop, which it's a very easy one to snag me with, which is like either road rage or fights. So now I'm watching like fist fights start, like giant brawls, and then there's like people blowing up in like a McDonald's and like freaking out at and I'm just like, I'm lost, I'm done, and I
yeah.
can't do anything about it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, people get mad about the For You and they're like, I don't want to see all this crap that makes me mad. But I actually think on Twitter in particular, it's good because it gets people a little bit out of their echo chambers that they're in. And they're in Twitter in particular. I think you can fall very easily into your own little echo chamber, and I kind of find how mad everybody gets about the the For You recommendations hilarious. Because I'm like, you guys
Yeah.
are all out here calling everyone snowflakes. This is everyone, and you can't handle, or you're free speech warriors, and you're mad because you're seeing a tweet that you don't like. It's just like, calm down.
Yeah, it's the I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether For You is good at that, or if it's just going to sink you deeper into your own echo chamber. It may be it's that it's going to judge by how much activity you give, or how long you spend scrolling on a certain thing, and maybe you are likely to stay there and look at something that pisses you off. So maybe you will actually be kicked out of your echo chamber that way. It won't just be pleasing things. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah.
This kind of brings us to your book about that Skittles for the primitive mind, and Tim, what's our problem? You wrote a whole book on it, and now it's such a
Yeah.
good book. I know you say it took you too long to write, and as someone who's been wanting to write a book for like almost 10 years and still hasn't even managed to get that far, I'm so impressed that you finished it, and it's really well done. It seems very well researched. I love all of your illustrations. I think you do such an incredible job of taking concepts and breaking them down into ways that are easy to digest and understand. That it's kind of a gift you have.
Thank you. Glad you feel that way. I mean, it took it. Yes, the worst would have been something taking forever, and you feel like you didn't even come together. This, I do feel like it came together by the end. So I'm like, okay, you can't do a 6-year project too many times. Like, I don't know, how long
Yeah.
is like a writer's career prime? Like 20 years. So like, okay, you just use up like a third of the rest of the pie there with like a one project. So that's why I don't want to do that again. I'm like, I don't want to just do like 4 things total in my life. But yeah, I'm pleased with how it came out. I feel like it was like worthy, that the topic was worthy of putting a lot of time into it, because it is like the kind of like the defining characteristic right now of our time, or one of them, is mass confusion and
Yes.
misunderstanding of
Yes.
things, and falling for like cheap Trojan horses for like movements or ideologies, or media narratives or whatever, and just like smart people falling for them in droves, and then people having arguments because their fake, incorrect perception of narratives are clashing with each other, and no one's actually talking about anything that's actually happening. So that was kind of like the goal here, was like, let me just try to like really tell a story or two about what I think is going on. And hopefully maybe people who read it can get more on the same page and have more real discussion.
Yeah, one of the things, I mean, there's so much. First of all, I think you and I you're a little bit younger than me, but we're very close in age from what I can gather from your book. And I think we come from a very similar place, and even just geographically. My family's from, the roots are in Rhode Island, and there's a part in your book where you're like, there were two things that were true. I was a Red Sox fan and I was a liberal. And that was the family I grew up in. It was like, I always joke, there was like JFK and Jesus on the wall, and you had to be a Red Sox fan. And it was just the water that I swam in. And I had such an interesting conversation with my dad about all this, who's a really, old school like JFK blue-blooded liberal. And he was saying that a lot of his friends and young people that he's been talking to, Gen Xers, are planning on voting for DeSantis if he runs, because they're these like disaffected liberals just desperate for a calm, effective presence in the political discourse, which is so not surprising to me based on just what I've seen and experienced over the past, probably, I guess, 8 years now. And it seems like something similar happened to you over the course of time. Not that you're a DeSantis supporter, but that you came from this kind of left wing where it was all through your life and everywhere you lived. I think we even moved to LA like the same time. Now, where do you find yourself? Are you kind of the exhausted majority?
Yeah. For me, it was like, I just remember in college, like watching the Bush Gore and then like Bush Kerry. You can kind of like
the end
use
of the
presidential
world
elections as like, and just presidential elections for me is like remembering those, because you can always kind of remember what you thought at that time. It's like a snapshot of like my journey politically. And for me, but through both of Obama elections, it was clean cut. It was like whoever, like Kerry, no one likes Kerry. I don't like Kerry, right? But it was like, it was like whoever is the Democrats are obviously the party of reason, of science, of smart people, of reasonable people, of non-bigots, of people who, if only they were just entirely in charge of this country would just be so far ahead of where it is. And like, if only this country could split into just the red country and the blue country, it would be so satisfying to watch the red country go and like flounder and become a third world country, and like how the blue country could finally just, that was the mindset. Right. I was in, and I've looked back at emails, I get an email, I look at like texts and email arguments I've been in with friends, which is another way to pinpoint where I was at any time. It was as recently as 2014 that, there was always a thread. There was always one thread that was kind of cognitive dissonance from this, which was, there were like real like leftist protesters when I was in college that were protesting some, living wage for the people who worked there. But the way they were doing it was really annoying. And like, there was always like a concept that like left-wing protesters were like annoying and we're often like, we're like, there was always like a part of me that like, even back in like high school, I had a teacher that every single English, it was English, every single book we read was about like racial oppression or gender oppression, and like 15 for 15. And so I didn't read The Great Gatsby. I didn't read Death of a Salesman. I didn't read The Lord of the Flies, all these things that other kids my age were reading. And so I can trace, I was like, okay, that annoyed me at the time. And I remember thinking how like I was very eye rolly about this woman's like overbearing, like pushing like social justice activism on us in class. So it's not that this was totally new, but other than that one thread, the bigger picture for me was always like, obviously the red America. And I had this like bigotry towards red America. Like they're just dumb and, bigoted and whatever. And then I try, it's hard to remember. It's somewhere between mid 2014 and mid 2016 that thread, that like thread of there is something very annoying about the left, even though they're the good guys. That something very annoying like subsumed my entire like picture of this, and I was like, it's not just very annoying; it is like it is bad. It is like actually a
Sinister.
force. It's not like,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. This is not like a force for good and they're just like a little overzealous. Like, actually, they're wrong and they're bad for progressive causes. Like, this is not actually, and they're zealots. And I don't like zealots. And they're bigoted towards like giant groups of people. They stereotype huge groups. And I'm like, and it's just somehow clicked. And I think, I mean, again, I'm not alone in this moment, but somehow clicked. And I was like, and I just, to me, it's not that I flipped red. It was, it was that I suddenly this like notion that this notion of this prior of blue good, red bad. Once that kind of just it didn't make sense, it just like suddenly like boom, I just like felt entirely free of that. So now it's
Yep.
not that red was good, it's just that the notion that all red must be bad was just suddenly out the window. And I was like, okay, this is stupid. There's like I'd read like Road to Serfdom. I'm like, it's not that all conservative thought is to be thrown out the window by like someone who doesn't barely knows anything about politics. Like, what am I doing? Like, obviously
Yeah. Yep.
conservative thought has like all kinds of I softened to all the red stuff, even if I didn't like adopt it. And then this notion that like the blue is purely good just like went out the window. And so that allowed me to like, now I think maybe suddenly for the first time I felt like I had something interesting to say about politics, because I was like, well, this transition in me is interesting, and where is this coming from, and what is this thing on the left that I'm growing increasingly uncomfortable and disdainful of. um, and and that was kind of the genesis of that. That's what got me to write about this. You know, this happened to also be right when Trump was rising up. This was like right before his primary,
Yep.
and I was like, okay, there's also just there's a lot going on there. What's going on there, and is it related? Is this guy like partially rising up because he's representing what is actually the underclass, and that this thing I don't like on the left is actually like this elitist, you know, group that has disdain for the underclass. And that was a whole narrative that never even crossed my mind. For me, it was red equals privileged white people who are bigoted.
Yep.
And now suddenly I was like, and once you, that prior is amazing how much it can blind you to
Yep.
just, you can't see anything. You can't adopt any new narratives. You can't see anything because you're just, and that's part of what my goal is with the book is I need to talk to other people who I know if we just saw the same news situation presented to us, we would see eye to eye, but they still have this prior. And I want to help them also just throw it out the window.
Yeah. I think that that's exactly describes what happened to me and along the same timeline. And it was so liberating. What you do in your book that is so helpful to me, and I think has been, I don't know. It's like for somebody like me who describes myself as politically homeless and feels lost and confused and often feels like I don't have any, even though I might have something to say, I don't know anything. I'm not this like policy wonk. I'm not somebody who's been in like the pundit game forever. I don't have real conviction about maybe free speech and that men and women are biologically different. Those are like the two hills I'm willing to die on. And those, but let people tell jokes that seems, but that's really free speech. And I don't know, it's been what your book made me realize, and something that was so insightful that I haven't seen anywhere, was when you were talking about people who try to refer to our concept of high rung political thinking often use the term center, but center is a what you think word. It refers to the middle part of the x-axis, as if holding viewpoints in those areas is the mark of a good thinker. Likewise, people often use far as proxy for low rung. This idea of vertical thinking it helped me understand something about me and why I often feel confused and lost, because you say that the people who try to refer to our concept of high rung political thinking often use the term center. And that is something that was like a mind blowing moment for me, because so many people are like, oh, you and your center and like you're centerish, and I'm not center. I just
Right.
don't know anything, and I don't always know how I feel about things, and I'm not like both sidesing everything. I think that there's equal opportunity to look at both sides, and when they're, like you say, misbehaving or behaving badly, I can point that out, but it made me realize that it took away a lot of my own self-doubt, because that's how I end up feeling when people are labeling me center. I'm like, it's not accurate. It's like I'm just trying to evaluate things, because I just often don't. I've realized in that transition that I made of basically being a libtard to like opening up my mind and realizing what a bigot I was to the right wing, real true
Right.
bigotry and
Hmm.
elitism and snobbery and all kinds of things that are not pretty, that there's just so much I don't know. So once that opened me up, it's humbled me in terms of not feeling like I can go out there and be like, here's what's true.
It's also it's really like liberating, and it's like it's a relief to be like, oh, I don't have to like pretend to know anything I don't know. And
Hmm.
that's okay, because basically there's this like this alternative reality that is going on, and like it's like a bubble within reality, which is in that bubble there's it's like Disney World. There's good guys and villains, there's the good team and the bad team, right? And that's all. And so in that, if you're inside that mindset, someone who is, very much, I'm a centrist and I'm in the middle and I think that we need centrist positions, and someone like you who's saying, I actually, I don't, I'm not, I'm not super educated on a lot of the specifics here. I haven't like done it, and I like to, my starting place is I don't know, um, and I think we should be able to talk about it. And sometimes I change my mind, so I'll have a position, and a lot of times my positions that I do come up with end up not really fitting cleanly with one side. They can't see the difference. There's no way to distinguish between that person and the actual centrist, the confident centrist who's very much in the discussion. And because if all there is this team and
Right.
that team, there's nowhere to put someone like you. And actually, what they will often do is it'll be centrist asterisk right wing or whatever, and it'll often be or some kind of spineless both sidesism, because if all there is this one game, and there's a very clear yes, right and wrong side, and you're saying, well, both sides can be, it just sounds so pathetic to people who are very much immersed in that. But there's a giant world of people who aren't in that game. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very liberating, like you said. And I think being able to have, like you say in the beginning of your book, you hope to give people a framework from which to evaluate these things. It really did give me a framework. It is helpful to me. It'll probably make me even more annoying to everyone who already hates me or thinks that I'm like Little Miss. My husband always calls me captain of the fence riding team as a joke. Um, but also kind of hilarious. And I like to ride. I mean, I definitely take that elevator up and down between low rung and high rung thinking. Can you just explain to the listeners this idea that you map of these two axes of the kind of vertical versus horizontal, the way to kind of map these things?
Yeah, I mean, it gets like there's some different layers to it, but the
Yes.
basic core idea, just intellectually, is if you think about, like, we're so concerned with, especially with politics, where do you stand? What team are you on? What's your policy stance on this and this? Who are you voting for? All of those are what you think questions. They're questions of what you think. And we have a lot of horizontal axes for this. We have the extreme right and the extreme left, and then we have the moderates and then the center. And this is a horizontal, one-dimensional axis. And we could lay out a lot of positions along that. It doesn't just have to be politics. It could be, what do you think about AI? We have the doomers over here, we have the optimists over here, and then everyone in between. Right, horizontal, what you think axis. That doesn't even distinguish between someone who is standing on this stance because they are really well thought out, and they could debate anyone, and they're open to changing their mind if evidence were presented. They're independently truly there for good reasons, and someone who is following a tribal checklist, and they have a ton of conviction that they're right, but they're just kind of borrowing the tribe's conviction. They're adopting it for themselves without actually having built that conviction from real stuff. So they couldn't debate anyone. They will never change their mind because it's not based on evidence in the first place. It's based on the good team thinks this, the good people like me think this. So therefore I'm not a bad person. So I'm obviously I'm not going to change my mind. So I just built a second axis, a vertical axis, and kind of made it more of a square and said, okay, well, let's say at the bottom you have the people who are kind of, I would call it, I use it like a ladder, like low rung thinking, and they are starting with their conclusion and then they're finding evidence to support it, or they're not even needing evidence. They're just saying this is right. Obviously, every single checklist item that the Democrats or that the Republicans say is right. And obviously the other side is obviously wrong about all of them. And then as you move up the ladder, you get more independent thinking. Or you could say the other way, up at the top, you're thinking like with no weird human confirmation bias or attachment to any ideas. You're just open and looking for the truth. And you're willing to say, I don't know. And you're not attached to any ideas. And your identity isn't involved in what you think. It's a separate thing. I'm a human. That's my own person. And then separately, I have beliefs. And those beliefs are just what I think is true. And I'm trying to get better at that. And so that person is going to be down to change their mind. And it's going to be, and when they do express conviction, it means something because they don't do it very often because, they have to really know their shit to express. But then this other motivation starts to creep in. This other part of our brain starts getting activated, which does identify with ideas and which associates what I believe with what good people like me and my friends believe. And gets very tribal, and so that's what it is. It's kind of that there's these other factors, and this is how you think. This is how you get to your beliefs. At the top, you get to your beliefs through evidence, like a scientist. You test hypotheses, you argue, you change your mind, and as you go down, you get to your ideas via kind of tribal allegiance, and just sometimes it's just your own previous beliefs. Maybe you worked hard for them a while back, but now for a long time now you've just stubbornly you've identified yourself with them, and now there's nothing that can make you change your mind. And again, I use the example of like politics a lot, but again, you can apply it to AI. Like I react to the, I've written about AI. It's something that I get asked to speak about, and so it's a topic that I'm into. And right now there's all this talk about AI. And there's doomers, and then there's real optimists, and then there's a lot of nuanced positions in between. There's people who are pessimistic for totally different reasons and disagree with each other. And my position is just my personality. My position is that I don't know. These experts seem to know more than I do, and they disagree with each other. So the last thing I want to do is I'm so not qualified to have a really strong opinion. What I can do is I can give hunches. I can, and what I'll probably do mostly is summarize what different experts are saying and try to just synthesize the debate that's going on. And no one dislikes me for that. People think that's great. Good. You're being humble. That's interesting. It actually makes people trust you versus, and there's plenty of people with the strong opinions. And we also need people like me who can not be like that. But as soon as I take that same personality and I bring it to politics, I'm just doing the same thing with politics. If there is, some strong opinion about Russia, Ukraine, or about immigration or about taxes, I'm going to react the same way. I'm going to say there's a lot of people who know way more than I do, and they disagree with each other. Plus, there's all kinds of tribalism, messing around with this debate. And I'm going to say big, I don't know until further notice. And it's, and I want to ask questions. But you go there and you again, you're centrist, you're waffling, you're wishy-washy. Both sidesism is a big one I get.
I get that all the time.
Yeah.
I get you're carrying water for Nazis. You're, like that.
Right.
What's the other one I get all the time? Oh, so many. So many. And again, the hilarity is I get it from both sides. I'm like,
yeah.
And they'll be telling me something about the other side, and I'm like, don't you see how you sound exactly alike? I just want you to understand. I sometimes it will take me a minute sometimes to figure out which side someone is on, because the weird thing that's happened through the pandemic and the lockdowns and all this is that um, there's been some like very strange overlaps with like hippies and right wingers that have this like confluence. My friend has this podcast, Conspirituality, where he talks a lot about the conspiracy theorist of the right meeting with the like pseudoscience spirituality people on the left. I started seeing it in like my yoga feed in during the lockdowns, around the vaccines, all this. It got very weird. So now I'm like, I don't even know if you're a right winger or a left winger. I just know you're like a zealot, but I don't even know which
Right. So
tribe
that's
you're
why
in.
this vertical axis is useful, because what they're both displaying is usually, look, obviously sometimes conspiracy theories are true once in a
Right.
while. But there's certain people that always seem to be on this, believing whatever the popular conspiracy theory is. And when the profile is, if you think about like skepticism, the way you learn mostly is indirect knowledge, right? You're not usually observing something yourself or conducting your own study. So you have to know, who to trust as you get information and different, tweets and articles and podcasts, and you learn in class and you read books and whatever. And so when you're just geared towards truth, kind of up on these high rungs, you're going to be judging sources based on their track record of accuracy. And if you don't know, you're going to have a healthy skepticism. You're going to be open to letting new information in, but you're going to but you're going to keep that filter kind of tight for something new, and you're going to have a kind of a whole place in your brain that is for maybe true ideas, and smaller place for this is definitely true. But as you and so if you think about that as a filter, if the filter is wide open, it means anything you hear, you believe, right?
Yeah.
So that means you're being gullible, right? Whoever talked to you last, that's the new thing you believe. On the other side, the filter's tight, right? You're paranoid.
Yeah.
And everyone's lying to me. No one, you can't trust anyone, right? So those are both really bad ways to learn. And so again, the high rung thinker wants to kind of be in that middle balance. But as you move down the rungs, right, to certain kind of a different kind of thinking, you're going to find is it's not that people go all the way to paranoid or all the way to gullible. It's that they develop this preference for certain kinds of ideas to be true. And then when information comes in that confirms that, they go totally gullible.
Yeah.
Any kind of article, they don't ask, is this fake news? They don't ask, like, is this study, who conducted the study? They don't ask who's this Twitter account that's tweeting this
Is
thing.
there
It's
context to this video I'm seeing?
Right? The filter goes wide open. They go full gullible. See, there's proof, and they're so sure about it. Meanwhile, anything that conflicts with their sacred belief, the thing that they want to believe, their little pet theory, the filter closes up. There's nothing you can present them that would make them say, actually, I need to reconsider. Nope, they're lying. See, that's the deep state. That's the whatever it is. And so you see this flip-flop back and forth between totally gullible and totally paranoid and closed off based on and so it's like the settings can only be in your skepticism part of your brain can only be configured towards one deep down motivation. So if it's towards truth, you're going to again behave that way. But if it's towards confirming a certain set of beliefs, then all the settings switch. Your skepticism starts acting in a certain way to serve that purpose instead. And it's interesting to see. But yeah, when you get to the low rungs, the right and left, it's like they're both doing the same thing, and they're both doing that.
There's something so fun about the culture wars too. I mean, it's funny because I have so many aspects of my personality that I get to express creatively. And this podcast, I get to sit down and have nuanced conversations with people all across the political spectrum, but also just from all different industries or just normies talking about their life. And I love it. And then I have factory settings with my husband, which we started for this very reason, which is all about those nature versus our nurture beliefs that they just came to us before we could even evaluate them. And my husband has a way of consuming media that I've now adopted where he'll read a headline or see a video or something. And the first question he asks himself is, why do I want this to be true, or why don't I want this to be true? It's just that where his baseline starting point, and kind of moves down from there. And he has time to kind of, well, he makes the time to go to the primary sources, to look at the study, to look who paid for the study, all of these things that we don't, the average person doesn't have time for. But then Dumpster Fire is just me making fun of all the culture wars and myself. But there's something so fun about it's fun because I almost get to like act as a zealot sometimes, or it's like faux outrage. That's the whole point of it's like a political news show making fun of political news shows. And I can see like it would be so much easier for me to be like, I don't know, like Matt Walsh, or like a culture warrior. It would be so fun.
I was just saying that the other day is like, I very much try not to be like a provocateur, not to be
it would be so
rude.
Fun though.
It would be so, sometimes I'm jealous because when I'll like gently talk about my issues with, woke ideology or with the MAGA movement or whatever, but I have to do it gently and respectfully so that it's clear that like, I'm not, like a dick culture warrior. I'm actually really thinking about this, but it would be so easy to just be like, well, like what the woke, of course, blah, blah, blah. And like, it would just be like, so, if you, this is by the way, what the news stations do. It's like, I'm at least trying to be like, when it comes to politics, like CBS and NBC of the old days, where it's like trying to just like maintain a level of like reasonableness and blah, blah, blah. But what the news stations realized in like the 80s and 90s, once cable TV came out, is if you can just say fuck you to half the country.
Yeah.
And then you can just go nuts with the other half of the country. And just, if it's this huge burden lifted to have to be polite to both sides. If you can just, totally, and it's like the same thing on Twitter. It's like, if I could just go and say fuck you to like a whole group of, then it would just be very easy and kind of like you said, kind of fun. But it's just not, it would just destroy all the credibility I've tried to build up so I can write a book like this and actually reach people and actually change minds. But it takes away a lot of the fun.
I mean, it was yesterday. I was thinking about this when I was reading your book. There's so much that every once in a while, like I'm doing a series actually with, maybe my podcast might change to this, but I'm doing a series with this guy, Thomas De Zengotita, who wrote this book Mediated, which no one's read and everyone should have read back in 2006. And we're taking it chapter by chapter because his book is so dense that I'm like, can we talk about every chapter individually on a podcast? And when I was reading your book, I was thinking you and I could easily do something like this with your book because every chapter has its own vibe. And I was also laughing because this whole like pride thing has been cracking me up. I was playing with my daughter and like, she's a little kid. The little xylophone is a rainbow and there are rainbow colors and all these things for kids. It's how they learn their colors. And I had to stop myself from tweeting a picture of it and be like, someone call Matt Walsh. I am literally shaking right now. Like, they are, Roy G. Biv is indoctrinating my child with the devil. I'm like, don't you realize you sound exactly the same as the people calling everyone transphobic and like there's a genocide? You all sound the same to me, but it's all zealots, I guess. But
because it's like there's a huge part of our brain that is made to do this.
Yeah.
That is supposed to do
and
this.
And it's kind of fun.
It's extremely fun. That's why I actually compare it to eating Skittles.
Yeah.
Because it is exactly the same as eating delicious, unhealthy food.
Yeah, I loved the term that you had in your book, political diabetes. I love that.
Yeah, it's a political junk food. And it's not just like, oh, we're comparing it to junk food. It is the same thing. It is a part of our brain that thinks it's 50,000 BC, that is trying to survive in a very specific kind of world that we are not in at all.
Yeah.
And it is that part of the brain doing its survival behavior for 50,000 BC, even though we live here today.
Yeah.
And so that involves eating calorie dense food because it really made sense then for survival and it doesn't make sense at all now. And it is digging into tribalism and hating the other and people who disagree with you and bonding together with your friends and people over shared sacred ideas and and just spending all of your time with them talking about how evil and bad and immoral all those other people are, which reflects on how great and righteous and smart and wonderful we are. Just like eating Skittles, it's bad for you. It is it's
It's
but
a
it was great
rush.
survival behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it feels amazing, dude. Sitting around with a bunch of people, just think about middle school. Sitting around with a bunch of people talking about how outgrouping someone, which is once you get older, I think part of you wakes up that's like, that's mean, that's not good, let's not do. But when you're young, that part of you is not really active, and you just feel cruel with a group of people to another person, and it feels so good because you're one of the cool, you're in the in group. And the kid who manages to kind of like the cool kid who manages to stand up to the other cool kids to tell them to stop bullying, that person is just evolved. They're just, they had a growth spurt that the other ones haven't had yet. It's like, but now we see, I look at these grownups are doing the same thing. We're indulging that really childish part of our brains.
Yeah.
And it feels amazing.
And even watching it, like you say so many things in your book that I'm like, oh God, it's so true. Just the Disney World politics where it's just good versus evil. There's no nuance. And the guy you mentioned who nobody knows, the representative that you talked to because
Eric
he's
Kilmer.
Yes, because he's nuanced and has great ideas and you've never heard of him. And I look at like AOC and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I'm like, this is middle school, and I can't turn away.
Of course. Yeah, it's and that's why it's like you said, the funny experience is being like, oh, these people with their tribalism and look at them, ha ha ha. And then you start to dig into that for a while and you realize it later, you're like, oh, I'm fucking doing the same exact thing. Oh my God. I'm like sitting around with a bunch of, people complaining about wokeness because of course we are all so, and I'm just like, oh shit. And you realize when you're in that zone, that you've slipped into it when everyone is always on the same exact page in like a certain text thread or whatever. And if you kind of defended the people that are like the boogeymen of the thread that everyone hates, it would kind of kill the vibe and it would make people kind of like not happy. People would be like really, it would kind of be icky. It was like, what are you doing? Like, why we don't like those? And you're like, oh no, we're fully in a thing. We're doing the same thing and it feels so good, but we're doing the same thing so yeah, it's like, you have to be careful because we are just all very, we're wired to do it. Slip into echo chamber, us versus them land.
I know it's so hard.
But when I do it, the them that we don't like deserve it because they're actually awful, and the us are actually good. But that's what everyone thinks. That's the problem.
That's what everyone thinks. It's funny. I moved. So I recently moved to Texas from California, and I was excited to escape California and all of the insane politics. And then I got here and I had a health issue. It's fine now. But right away I had to deal with you can't get individual PPOs in Texas. I guess it's like this in most of the country. I didn't know this. And so I had to get an HMO, which you have to wait for a reference. People probably have no idea. A lot of people probably have no idea how bad healthcare. Well, I think most people know how bad healthcare is no matter where you are. But I didn't know how shit it is in Texas. And part of me was depressed that I moved to this state where I was like, oh, it's like this actually is a part of this state that sucks. I knew the weather was going to be shit, but I didn't know the healthcare was fucking awful too. And that's something in California that's just better. You have better options and you have, it was just something that was kind of eye-opening to me. And a part of me, I was observing this, felt like I couldn't even express that because I moved to Texas from California and you've got to just leave that shit state behind. And I was like, it's so easy to slip into. It's just so easy to slip into kind of echo chamber of my own mind. It's not even like anyone would care.
No, there was a new religious creed in your mind, which was California is
eat bad.
And
Texas is
so
better.
anything that is acknowledging that California is better than Texas in some way, it fucks with the purity, right?
Yeah.
It's delicious purity. It feels so good, the purity. Cognitive dissonance doesn't feel good. It doesn't. Change, the people who I admire as thinkers, they change their mind a lot. It's not that that feels good. Changing your mind's like going to the gym. It sucks, but it makes you smarter, right? It's people who go to the gym a lot, they don't like it, most of them, but they have this discipline, and so eating junk food always tastes better, and that that a lot of times this healthy thinking behavior is like, yeah, it's like healthy food or healthy exercise. It's like, it sucks. But yeah, and by the way, I've been living in New York for 14 years, and we're moving to Austin
Are you?
in a few months. Yeah. So
Yay.
I'm also going to be in the same situation.
I'm so excited. We're going to be neighbors.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It does feel like the heterodox capital of the world at the moment. Like
I know. I feel
everybody's
very
moving here.
unoriginal.
I'm so basic. I just wrote a whole column about this. I'm like like a basic bitch that just moved to California from
But I actually
California to
think
Texas.
I think it's a good time to be a good place in life to be unoriginal about, is where you move, because like by definition, where everyone is going, that is where you should go. Like it's like where it's like, if I feel like all these people who I like and admire and want to hang out with are moving to this place, it's good to be a follower there, because
Yeah.
if you go be an original, you move somewhere where no one is.
Yeah.
That's not a good
I'll go to
plan.
Tulsa.
Right. Exactly. It doesn't, for me, like wherever I think there's a really good concentration of friends and people who I want to meet, like that's what matters much more than the place itself.
I can't tell you actually how much now that it's been a month. Basically, it was a month this past weekend. So it wasn't even that long and just every time I see something about California or what, I'm like, and no, Texas has problems. I moved here knowing that. I know that it has a lot of the same problems as California, the grid, drought, a lot of issues. But I actually feel like there are people here who are brilliant minds, original thinkers. The more people that gather who are like that, the more this state will be capable of handling the growth and the problems that are, coming down the pipe for it, as opposed to where I left, where it's just, there's no diversity of thought. It's just, there's no one's pushing back. It was just not, and it was impossible to get ahead. There's still, I feel like, and I just wrote this column for Spectator, I feel like the kind of American dream middle class is still thriving here, and it's alive and well. And I moved to the suburbs because I didn't want to live in Austin proper, and Austin's actually getting quite expensive, but it's so diverse out here. I grew up in a suburb in Minnesota. It was not that was my big fear, was that there wouldn't be any multiculturalism. And it is, my neighbors are Nigerian, they're Indian, it's American, Asian Americans. It's just crazy. Not the suburb I grew up in Minnesota at all. And that's been such a pleasant surprise. It feels so like very family oriented, but also people who appreciate America. I feel like I was just saying this, Memorial Day, there were like flags everywhere. I'm like, if you put an American flag out in LA, it's basically like a sign that's like, I'm a conservative.
Yeah, in general, like I just don't want to live somewhere where there's like an oppressive ideology playing like intellectual tyrant, hovering over the entire social atmosphere. Like, I just my sisters live in Boulder, Colorado, and it's an awesome place for so many reasons. But I just feel like, and again, maybe I'm stereotyping this place, I don't understand fully, but it just feels like everyone there, you can already tell what everyone believes politically, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's often, ironically, I feel like it's often the really undiverse, like ethnically undiverse places that are also really politically not diverse. And in the case of Boulder, politically not diverse in a way where everyone is together talking about how great diversity is. It's kind of odd.
Yeah, no, that's so true.
Like this is like a totally not that related anecdote, but like a friend was telling me, this is a friend of a friend, so take it with a grain of salt. But a friend was telling me that his black friend lived in Houston for a bunch of years or over a decade. Then he moved to Portland, Oregon. And he said that in Houston, he was treated like a guy. And in Portland, he was treated like a black guy. And it's
Uh,
like, it's like, I think so often it's like this is now getting to a whole different thing, but it's just like, it is often the places that actually, there where there actually is diversity. There's also, you're just going to come across like less reprimanding about diversity. I don't know. I'm not sure I'm making a point here, but it just it just popped into my head when you're talking about like, you're moving to a place because you value diversity away from people who are going to scream at you about diversity. And it's
right.
just kind of odd. Yeah.
I was just reading some study or some poll that came out or something they did, and it was basically like high earning white progressives are more likely to live in white areas than high earning conservatives.
Yeah.
Like
That
they're
doesn't
more
surprise me. Yeah.
they're more likely to be like NIMBY too. It was interesting. I'm like I that
Yeah.
kind of checks out from my experience. It's easy to be like in your gated community.
Well, I'll just say it's also all the, what percentage of the people who are saying defund the police were in places where they might get robbed on the street corner. Like not very many,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I mean this was something that became glaringly obvious in the pandemic, particularly around school closures and things like that, where it was the people who spoke the most about the marginalized and the oppressed making decisions that would have the most far-reaching effects on exactly those people. And that was something that I was like losing my mind about over the pandemic.
Hypocrisy is just annoying. Like, and unearned righteousness, unearned confidence, hypocrisy. Like it's just like all things that are just so irritating. Like I feel like converged on that issue, and it's like, or just on, in general, I feel like a lot of what is so. I said that earlier, like I was like, the defining thing about our time is like confusion. It's also just like the amount of like insane hypocrisy is just it's kind of maddening, and that's why writing a book about this was such a frustrating experience because you're just immersed in like the most annoying political behavior possible for so many years.
Yeah.
um it's nice to just be able to talk about it now and not have to actually write about it all the time, but
Yeah, that must have been. I was reading it and I'm like, wow, this is a book that I probably it's almost exactly like a book I wanted to write, but I feel like it would have taken me 6 years. It deserves the time that you took to write it. And I do think that even trying to write things about this transition, it kind of makes me sad because I feel like I thought it might be getting better, but it just seems like it's getting worse. And now we're moving into another election cycle. And it's a very strange time with, like on the right, I'm kind of a fascinated observer of what's happening politically over there between DeSantis and Trump. Because I wasn't actually sure that DeSantis would like have the balls to go up against Trump. I thought he might be like, I'm young, I'll sit this election cycle out and I'll wait another 4 years and then I'll, take my shot and not have to deal with all of this kind of MAGA insanity. But it seems like he's going for it because he also has momentum, and it's fascinating to observe what's happening there.
yeah, Republicans kind of have a recent history of Republican voters of giving people a second chance, like Romney, McCain. Both of those guys, were losers in primaries, and then they were winners later. So he might have a second chance. He might be looking at that and saying, okay, so maybe if this doesn't work out, then I can come back in 4 years. But also the iron is hot for him right now, and that he has like such a powerful political issue where he's the poster boy of it, which is, stuff happening in schools with people's kids, which is like nothing is more powerful politically than an issue like that. People assume Trump's going to be the nominee, but I don't know. I think it's a question of whether he can he has the same, like, obviously he has a hardcore base, but if that base slips by 15-20% in size, it maybe can't win anymore, and so I don't know what's going to happen there, but I do find it interesting. Like, if I wish this were another country. If I would love American politics if I lived somewhere else. It would be so funny, and it would be like the great reality show. But it's annoying when it's your own country because there's like also like a stress about it. It's like, yeah, I would just love to gawk at American politics from afar.
Yeah, exactly. It would be easy to laugh at. It reminded me though of the kind of fighting you're seeing. I feel like the Republican Party is pretty good at uniting right now. It seems like that brother versus brother or cousin versus cousin before they're fighting, the other group. And I'm interested to see, say DeSantis is the winner. Do they run Biden? Like that, right now I'm just fascinated by. It's a very interesting time. I feel like
Well,
it
it's
would
just
be.
something with the system. Like, it's just crazy that this somehow, whether it's the incentive system or just the mechanics of American politics, it is elevating someone like Biden to the very top. And it just is so odd. Like, you're just, you watch like professional sports and you're like, these are the best of the best of the best. It's like, it should be a system where it's like, oh, the people who actually make it to high level politics, they're all so good. They're so smart. They're such good speakers. They're all so charming. They're all like so well, and it's like, it just doesn't happen like that. It would be like if you're watching the NBA and there were like awful athletes who were the ones playing. And it's like, it's crazy kind of.
I just always joke. I'm like, I just would like not even just right before we talked on Twitter. I'm like, can we at least retire the silent generation where these people aren't even boomers? They're fucking silent generation. It's like, this is one level down from the greatest generation. Are you kidding me? Can
Right.
we at least have
Yeah.
them maybe let go of the reins of power?
Right. And I guess Biden is silent generation, right?
Yeah.
And Trump.
I think Trump might be too. Maybe Trump is like
Right.
right on the line, but if he's a boomer, he's an old boomer.
Right. Old boomers.
But Biden's definitely silent generation. I mean, Feinstein.
Yeah, she's really,
She's like greatest generation.
Right. She's Jewish. Yeah, she's greatest generation. No, I mean, like, my grandmother's 98, and I feel like Feinstein's like a few years younger than she is.
Yeah, it's
Like,
just nuts.
they have the same vibe.
Yeah.
But it's like in every other profession, the 80-year-olds are long retired, right? And they're like kicking back and relaxing
with their grandkids and great grandkids.
Right? Like, it's such a weird arena where the only arena where people, the most powerful people are in their 70s and 80s is this very important arena. And in all other things, you just hit your prime. I mean, think about it, like, I don't know, just as a writer, I sometimes freak out because I'm like, damn, I don't see many like people in their 70s and 80s writing like awesome books. It happens. But, look at the great writers. They do their best work in their 30s and 40s and maybe their 50s. And it's just like every profession is kind of like that. I mean, yeah, part of it is just you just have to usually you have to have like a long political career first, so people get familiar with you. It's hard to beat a really familiar face, and you get familiar by being in Washington for 30 years.
It's just branding. It's crazy. It really is such a confluence of so many things. And I really love how you open your book where you break down our entire civilization into different pages of books and just the difference in page 999 to page 1000. And I just had Mike Jones on. He has this awesome YouTube site. He's like a survivalist, but also kind of a gun guy. And he was like, come do a course. We'll get you up to speed and you can learn what a 6-year-old knew in 1830. And I'm like, it's so true. We like don't know
Yeah.
shit.
No, it's like people were being so much of our school system is designed to prepare people for a industrial revolution, people to be on assembly lines.
Yeah.
It's the most daunting issue for me is like, how would you even try to fix that? I don't even know how you would. It's like I could design a good system, a good like educational system, probably but I don't know how you'd ever implement it. I don't. Yeah, it's just a whole other.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other crazy thing that's in such an upheaval right now is all those jobs that you had these kids learning. The school system, like you said, is essentially built for. They are AI and robots will be able to do that in no time if they're not already doing them and have been replaced. So how do I think media literacy would be really important. I don't know what to train my child, how to train my child. A classic liberal, but do they even do homework anymore? Is it like are they just chat GPTing all of their assignments?
Well, yeah. I mean, like we all okay. So like cursive was an important skill, and now it's not, right? But AI is going to make like 100 versions of that.
Yeah.
Where AI is a magic wand. These tools are magic wands, and your kid is going to live in a world that where magic wands are everywhere. And so, if school is supposed to prepare you to crush life in the world that you live in, it should be training kids to do stuff with AI, like become unbelievable at using AI to do things they want to do and get things they want to get, and learn things they want to learn. So like people are upset about essay writing. Well, but it's like, okay, so essay writing isn't a skill. It's like cursive.
Yeah.
You need to be well spoken. You should be able to like learn how to debate and learn how to present an argument.
Logic.
But yeah, but like writing, yeah, being a good writer, I just think that's like cursive now, and there's a lot of examples like that.
So crazy. It's
But
so
what I wish kids
crazy.
would learn, by the way, what I wish kids would is like basic civics. Like if
Right.
like, so we talked like, so I feel pretty humble about most of my political views, but there's a few things I feel very strong about. Free speech, because free speech is how a group of people in a society can put their heads together and come up with collective wisdom and come up with and figure out answers to problems. And when you remove free speech, the only alternative is the powerful people get to impose their echo chamber on everyone else. That's all that ever happens. The alternative to free speech is the powerful people's echo chamber we all live in. It might be culturally powerful, maybe it's politically powerful, whatever, depending on the country. But so I feel strong about that. But another thing I feel really strongly about and is a liberal democracy is like a house. Like liberalism is like a house we live in. I like to like use it as like a metaphor. It's like a house where that has certain broad rules and laws, and those are liberal laws, and that's kind of like the the walls of the house. But then there's the shared trust in those laws. There's the shared understanding of those rules and the norms, the liberal norms and the liberal spirit, like actually valuing free speech, not just legalizing it, but actually valuing. Those are support beams in the house, the kind of shared norms, shared trust. So that's one thing I think is absolutely critical for kids to learn, is like basic civics. Like, it's like, it should be just like such a core part of an education for anyone living in a liberal house to have to learn those things. And so that they will be grownups who are following those norms and who are defending those norms. And right now, I feel like at least I think a lot of schools just aren't even teaching that. And of course, what a lot of it's been replaced by is a very specific political ideology that they're being kind of trained on.
Indoctrinated.
So yes. To me, that's just like one easy. It's like I said, I don't know how the education system should change, but it's like one thing I know is I think like kids in a country like the U.S. should be learning about like civics about the U.S. very strongly.
Yeah, that's true. I always joke I'm not sure if I should be teaching my daughter how to grow food or teaching her STEM, but I think it's probably both. Like this could go two ways as you kind of open your book with like, well, it could be like amazing things that we can't even conceive of, or we might be reduced to 6-year-olds in 1830 learning how to like build a fire from sticks if we even survive whatever self-imposed self-destruction occurs.
Yeah, like Stone Age,
Yeah.
you know,
Like there's no
oh no,
power
Stone Age
and
101. Stone Age 101 because there are some like apocalypse scenarios that people talk about right now, but there's also just this whole other scenario where just civilization just collapses, but like we're
yeah.
still here.
Yeah.
And it's, Stone Age 101 is important.
This has been a joy. I
Yeah.
always ask the same two questions. You'll have to come back on, and I can't wait to see you when you're in Austin. And I think our kids are close enough in age that they'll be able to be buddies, which is exciting.
Yeah. My 3-month-old is extremely not conscious at the moment,
Yeah.
but that'll come around, I imagine.
Yeah, no, they come online right about now. Like 4 months is really when you're like, whoa. I mean, I've been saying having a kid is like watching AI become sentient. It's fucking wild. It's just like, what? Just watching them like learn how to use their bodies. Like, it's so crazy. It's such a miracle. I'm
Day to day,
obsessed.
like I mean, like Wednesday she goes to bed like
Yeah.
not really like looking me in the eye in a certain way, and then Thursday she wakes up and I'm like, oh, you are more aware that I'm
Yep.
here than you were
Yep.
literally like 12 hours ago.
Yeah, and how
It's it
quickly they take information and just practice it and get better at it. It's been a wild adventure already. I'm just so excited. And it
how
is
old is yours?
she just turned a year. Yeah, right now it's like night and day, but in a couple of years they'll just be buds. They'll be the same age basically. And that's the other crazy thing. The difference between a 3-month-old and a 9-month-old is so huge, and they'll be in the same class. Like they're the
Yeah.
same
Yeah. It's
year.
I was hanging out with a 7-month-old the other day, and I was like, this is a giant baby.
Yeah,
I was like, I've never seen I was like, this is like an adult sized baby. It was just felt like such a big baby compared to,
yeah,
but it's
yeah,
weird having a baby right now because you're just like, is she going to live to 500? Is she going to die in
yeah,
the apocalypse? Like,
yeah,
is she going to be on Mars? Or
yeah.
is it going to be, is all of this hype and she's going to live kind of like a life like
Like
mine,
we
but a little
did.
more futuristic? Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's really, yeah,
yeah. I have the same thoughts. It's very much like, is she? I was joking in an essay that I wrote about how all the decisions you make as new parents now versus even like when my sister had kids, it's just there's so much information and it makes you insane. And the like cord banking, is a big one you make early on. You're like, are we going to bank the cord blood? And I'm like, I can already see her being like, all my other friends are going to live forever. And I didn't because you're too cheap to freeze my cord blood. I'm like, I thought it was a scam.
totally. I did think it was a scam and I didn't do it. So I'm hoping it doesn't matter.
I know, I didn't either. Now I'm like, oh shit, is this gonna be like, all my other friends are living forever,
I
mom?
know.
Like, I'm sorry.
It does seem like something to play it safe with in retrospect, which is why it's a great scam.
Yeah, it's like insurance. Well, I always ask the same two questions at the end of every podcast. Everyone should buy your book and read it, and they're gonna think I'm a high rung thinker, and then realize, as I did, the more I read the book, that I'm really more of like I vacillate between the sports player and probably just the zealot because it's more fun.
Yeah, but if you know you're being a zealot, you're not really being a zealot.
Oh, that's interesting.
You're having fun like cosplaying a zealot.
It's so fun.
It's different.
God.
Yeah.
I'm so envious of the believers. What is your biggest defect of character?
Oh God. Well, for me, I am like there's I don't know, like when I was in 4th grade and I first started getting like homework, I would not I would resist doing it, and then I would wake up the next morning and frantically do it before class. And if you asked me at the time, I would have thought that that's the kind of thing I probably will grow out of by the time I'm 41.
Nope.
And I haven't. I'm like an epic self-defeating procrastinator.
I am
And
so
it
related to that.
is, it really sucks. It's
Yeah.
like, it's so bad. It's like it's something that it's like, it's every part of your life will be better if you just do what you're supposed to do when you wake up, which by the way isn't even that bad. Like it's not even like but it's this crazy maniacal self-defeating behavior that I continue to do.
Do you live with someone who's not a procrastinator? My husband is not a procrastinator and he's so high functioning. I'm like, this is what I would be. He's like, oh, you're organizing the pantry, so you must be on deadline. I'm like, yep, it's true.
Non-procrastinators don't understand.
He's
It's
like,
a little like how people who are just totally, they eat healthy and it's pretty easy for them to avoid, whatever. They do not understand people who gain a ton of weight because they eat really bad. It doesn't make sense. It's like, why would you do that? Why would people who exercise, they don't understand people who don't. So if you don't have a weird self-defeating issue, it's really hard to understand someone who does. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't even like the taste of alcohol. To me, I'm like, how could someone want to drink that much alcohol? And yet, obviously, people who have that problem, it is a debilitating disease, right?
yeah,
And so,
I'm 9 years sober.
right, okay, so exactly. And so when you don't have it, the problem, but having one self-defeating thing can remind you to be very, very compassionate towards any other ones. And it's misdiagnosed by non-procrastinators as just like laziness, which I am quite lazy, but that's not really what's going on. That's not, I'll work really hard. Like you said, the pantry, I'll like expend a ton of energy on the wrong thing. So it's not quite that. Yeah.
There's in recovery in one of the books that's like procrastination is just a long word for sloth. I'm like, oof, I feel that one.
By the way, the word itself is a Latin word, which means the Roman Empire had this problem. Like people in the Roman Empire were procrastinating.
I look at guys
it means to put off till tomorrow.
yeah. Oh, interesting.
That's
manana. I look at like guys like Ben Shapiro and some of my friends. I'm like, you've written like 6 books in the time that I've thought about writing one.
I just went on Ryan Holiday's podcast, and he makes me so angry because I told him that he basically, every time I finished a page of a book, my book, he published another book.
At least he's like putting his money where his mouth is with all that Stoic stuff. At least we know he's practicing what he preaches.
It's like, how does your perfectionism not get in the way of like, yeah, it's inexplicable to me. I certain people who like, when they have, they're doing something, there's somewhere kind of like, and they have like 15 minutes in between things, and they'll like jump into the most important thing. They'll jump into that Word doc and write a paragraph. And I'm like, I have to have like the perfect conditions, the empty day, the weather, I feel exactly right. And then like, even then I probably will feel so good and happy that I want to do something more fun, like text people.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And what's your biggest asset?
My biggest asset, I think, is that I'm pretty good about like when I have a unique or like just a point of view or an assessment of something that emerges from original thinking, and conventional wisdom disagrees with that. I'm pretty good about like running with the thing that I think, and so I think that we all have a bunch of original reasoning or a bunch of original thoughts. And I think probably you would qualify for this too, because that's what makes a good stand-up comedian, is when they are seeing something that everyone in their subconscious knows is true, but like it's not the normal thing to say. No one actually says it out loud, and no one really even thinks it in their consciousness necessarily. And then the stand-up comedian can just that independent like line of thought is very loud in their head, and they can hear it, and then they can go say it. They're proud to go say it. And so I think I do that pretty well. I think I like I'm very much like my own person.
Yeah.
I haven't like conformed into like a grown up that you're supposed to be at all. And I think that like probably is partially what's shitty about me, but also I think it's what's good about me too.
Yeah. I love that. Where can we find
Yeah.
you and all of your stuff?
Wait, but why? That's
Yeah.
where I am on Twitter and my blog and everything else.
Well, this has been so fun. Now I feel like we are actually friends for life.
Yay.
Um,
Amazing.
So thank you for coming on.
All right. Thanks for having me.
It's time for the weekly check-in with Bridget and cousin Maggie. Texas sun.
And now for the check-in.
Ooh, Texas sun.
Bridget's just going to serenade you all.
I'm just going to sing a song this week. It's a little ditty I like to call Matilda Was an Astral Traveler.
Oh, God. That's the stickiest jingle in the world.
It's not a jingle. It's a children's lullaby. Yes. I have so many for her. I have 3 that I use on the regular that I just made up.
I wonder if she'll inherit your jingle ability.
Hopefully she'll put it to use and make millions of dollars like I should have.
She'll be the next Taylor Swift.
Just a little earworm. If I had a band, I would call it Earworm.
It's a good name for a band.
Yeah, but it would have to be like a electronic band or something.
Yeah, it would.
Unless it was like, I don't know. I don't see a bluegrass band being called Earworm.
No. We just went on a lovely walk.
Yep. I love Texas. I just like that everything is slowed down, even the speaking.
Yeah.
I love the heat. I thrive in this heat. I just love it. It makes me so, it seriously reminds me of Sri Lanka, which is my favorite place ever, or India, or any of these countries where there's no AC and it's this hot all the time.
Hot and humid.
I love it. I like being sticky and...
I don't love it, but I've been okay so far. Like when we go out for a walk, I don't mind that.
Yeah.
Like in the evening when the sun's going down and it's still hot and humid. That just reminds me of summer at home too. So without the ocean breeze, but
I want to know what everyone's doing for the summer.
yes.
I've determined to have my summer of fun.
Yes.
So I'm going to do fun things, even though we should be working full time all the time, but I can't live like that. I don't think it's healthy.
No. And yes, we should be working. We are working. We do work a lot all the time, but it's like you said the other day, you were reading some deathbed book.
I think it was like just some article I scrolled into at like 2 a.m., where you're just up and not sleeping and you should be and you're scrolling. And then it's like 12 things that EMTs said they heard from people on their deathbeds. And you're like, I'm going to click on that at 2 a.m.
And what was it?
Well, I don't remember all 12 things, but I do remember that most people, people don't regret. The thing they don't regret is no one's like, I wish I had worked more.
Right. Exactly. They regret time spent with family or,
mostly time
loved
spent with their
ones.
kids.
Yeah.
Mostly time spent with, their spouses, parents. It's
So-
stuck with me because, it was right before I shifted into my subconscious. I was also thinking about that creepy thing. What was it that I think it was something we read where it was like, count the number of times that you'll see
Your family.
Yeah, if you don't live near them.
And you were like, it's like 20 or less. And I was like, oh my God.
That was really earth shattering for me. That one ruined my life.
Yeah.
It was like, how many times will you see your parents if you don't live near them?
Right. And how many times do you go back to see them?
Yeah. And figure
yeah.
out how many years they might have left. And I was like, oh, it's like 14. It's so unsettling.
Yeah, no. It makes you just want to get on a plane right now.
Yeah. And so I think I've hit rock bottom with my writing, and I'm working with Paul Shirley, who's been on the podcast. Hasn't he been on more than once?
Yeah, I think twice.
I love
but
Paul.
early days.
Early day. I should have him on again. But he started that, writer's block in LA, which I subscribed to and never went to. And then we were talking about our friend who died because he was friends with Gigi and her husband as well. I still can't believe Chris is dead. It's so fucking beyond anything I can't get my mind around it. And so he and I were talking about this disgusting hit piece that came out on Gigi. And he was like, my brain is like, I am incapable of processing that piece. He said, and then we were just talking and he was asking me about my book. And I was like, I can't talk to you about this, Paul. Because he's so disciplined. He's written like 10 books. I was like, I can't even. I'm like, there's so much shame and embarrassment and ego and shame. And he's like, I want to help you. So I was like, look, he's like, sleep on it. I'm offering you help. And I really realized that I was like, this is rock bottom because I was like, I need help. I need fucking help.
There's no shame in asking for help.
You can't get out of like the matrix of your own mind. That's in my experience. And I do think I've learned just from observing Rogan in particular, having him in my life and as a friend, and seeing guys like Paul. At their core, they're athletes. So they treat everything the way you would treat it if you're an athlete, which is to get up and do it no matter how you feel, no matter what, and know what you're going to do before you do it so you can eliminate a lot of decision making. It's like, here's how I eat on days when I'm working out. I know when it's leg day. I know when they know what drills they're doing. They know when they're doing what they're doing. And that's actually quite helpful for me when I implement that kind of structure, but it doesn't come naturally. And then Jaron and I were talking about like all the blocks that come up for me. And I was talking to my therapist about it. And then I started talking about how athletic I was when I was a kid and how I loved sports, but I was either getting injured or when my parents got divorced, they just stopped being able to like take care of us.
Right.
I mean, basically.
No, truly. Yeah. That is not an exaggeration.
I was going to be like, drive assist words, but it's really like they just kind of stopped being able to
parent,
be functional parents. And the biggest thing that when it's like, I've never been able, what did Jaron say? The way he worded it was like a gong went off. Where he was like, so you've never been able to see your potential.
Yeah, see it
like
through.
I wanted to play soccer so badly. I was obsessed with it. I would go to like soccer camps, and then it just was like, we can't do that anymore.
Yeah, that's actually crazy. That's really, you've never been able to like climb the mountain where you like played soccer through college. You know, that kind of thing. Yeah,
there was always like because we were always moving. So I was always. So I'm like only just realizing this, just how ingrained that pattern is in me. And then also just all of the like, not to overuse a word that I hate, but just trauma stuff with parental figures and whatnot. It's like my therapist was talking about this concept of flooring or the floor where it's whatever is like particularly if you have trauma, it's like your floor is different than everyone else's. I don't fully understand it. I have to look it up and try and understand it. But I think there's a lot to all of that. And so he's been giving me these, I have to like be accountable. I have to tell him before I get started during the week, what days I'm writing, what I'm writing, when I'm writing.
That's great.
I can't tell you how fucking uncomfortable it is. I've done it for 2 days and I feel like crawling out of my skin.
Wow.
And
just because you have to answer to someone?
I don't know. There's like a pit in my stomach that I can't figure out what it is. And it's been kind of here since I moved to Texas, but I don't know what, it's like something's gnawing at me and I don't know what it is. And it feels like I can kind of write my way through it or produce my way through. I don't know what it is. I don't know. It's just this like unsettling knot in my stomach, and I had those stomach issues, so it's also not surprising that now I just have like this. It's like a knot. I don't know how to describe it. And the other thing I've realized, and again, this has only been in 2 days of this 6 weeks that we're gonna do, is that I have shredded my ability to focus.
Wow.
It's weird because if I'm on deadline and I have to get a piece out, I will do it, but I need the pressure of being a procrastinator. And it's not like if I have to do something in the time that I schedule it, writing in particular, it makes me so uncomfortable. And
without a hard deadline on you.
Yeah. And the amount of times that I have had to go and like the amount of times that I've sat down because I can't even do more than 25-minute sprint. Like I'm basically doing Pomodoro because that's about as long as I can focus, especially on like the kind of piece I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Where every 5 minutes I'm like, oh, I should Google this. It's so ineffective. It is the most ineffective way to write. But the discomfort I feel with just sitting here and observing how I will do anything to get off of the page and out of the writing process. It's like meditation.
Yeah.
It's basically like my monkey mind, but I have an internet that connects to the world, and I'm like, oh, I've got to go get a comment. I need to look that up. I'm like, oh my God, Bridget, just fucking write 200 words. Like just sit here and write. And I can't, it hasn't been fun.
Wow.
It's been very revealing.
So you're like, okay, I've got to build my writing muscle back up.
Ugh. Shredded. It's like completely atrophied. It's not atrophied.
No.
It's like I was saying the other day, I'm lazy. I don't look lazy, but only certain people know what that means. And guys like Paul know. I'm like, I am a lazy piece of shit. And it's because I get away with being lazy.
It's because you could write a paper overnight and get an A on it.
I still have that habit. It's just not, but you can only ride that for so long. Right. People who are persistent will ultimately do better.
Win out.
Like talent, and my talent isn't even like genius level. It's like, good enough.
Right.
It will only get me so far.
Right.
And I think I'm hitting that ceiling.
You need the discipline. It takes discipline.
It's so annoying. And I know people will hear this and be like, oh, you do this and you do that. And I'm like, yeah, but I could do more.
But
I know that.
The thing that I know about you is if you don't write a book in your lifetime, it will destroy your soul.
Yeah.
You know, like that is one of the, like, yeah, you do a lot of other stuff, but if everything else has to give way for you to write a book, like that's what's going to happen because you have to write a book.
But the insanely crazy and insidious ways that I will find to procrastinate, I've started 3 podcasts.
I know.
I had a baby, so I don't have to write a book. I went to my editor to pitch what should have been my column, and it's turned into this piece that now I've turned into like an even bigger piece. Just because this was supposed to be my first week of writing, and now I'm like, I'm on deadline with this piece, and I am, and I want to do it, but it also is like organizing the spices.
Resistance.
It's like, oh, well, why don't you write this piece and pitch that instead? You're a journalist, Bridget. Go be a journalist.
Resistance. It's a motherfucker.
Yeah, it's sneaky. And because I'm sober and everything, my resistance looks like productivity.
It is creeping.
Same thing with stand-up.
Yeah. Those are the 2 things for you. Those are your 2 like big mountains to climb.
Yeah, but Paul made a good point. He's like, how does the idea of writing a book make you feel? And I'm like, I don't know. It seems like everyone who does it they're excited, but it's also just like kind of a letdown.
It's a grind.
And so I don't know if I would just feel like a massive sense of, but then I think that's also just anything. Like if I did an hour special and I'd have to start over with new material again, you're like, oh God.
It's a huge push for any creative process,
Yeah.
like to like
it's like giving a
birth it, and then it's
then
out in the
there's
world,
like
and
a
you're like, that's it,
postpartum.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Now I'm depressed.
Yeah, but that's why his whole program is based in process and meaning. So it's like, is this giving meaning? It's great. It's actually, I think he's very talented at what he does, and he gets really excited about it. And I can see it being something that I would love to do with people too, or just spread his message to the world, because
That's good.
he's so disciplined.
That's good. Well, hey, stay tuned to see how Bridget thrives in this program.
I literally wish that I could like somehow, and I'm sure this is what Elon Musk is working on, put a chip in my brain and record what it's like to be in there when I'm trying to sit in front of my computer and write for 25 minutes.
I think we'd all pay to see that.
I'd put it behind the paywall at twitter.com. Tune in next week for another riveting episode that will change your life, help you get out of your own way, and solve all the world's problems. I want to thank our composer, Jared Elias, my co-producer and cousin, Maggie, and all of you out there listening. This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.